So we can write intervals using whole and half steps. We already learned how to do that with seconds and thirds. So for this video, we're going to look at fourths. Um, so as we know, a perfect fourth is 2.5 steps. That's also 5 half steps. I personally like to think in terms of whole steps. And some people like to think in terms of total number of half steps. So in this, I'm going to be looking at it from both ways. So perfect fourth is 2.5 steps. That's half a step bigger than a major third. An augmented fourth is 3 steps. And remember, we talked about in class 3 steps, also called 3 tones or a tritone. And that's that nasty sounding interval that used to literally be against the law in the Roman Catholic Church anyway. And diminished fourth is, of course, a half a step smaller than a perfect fourth. And since a perfect fourth is 2.5 steps, diminished fourth is 2 steps, that means that it is the enharmonic equivalent of a major third. Now, right here, I've written that we're going to do a perfect fourth. And we have a G going up to a C, or you can look at it as a C going down to a G. And what we're going to do is see, is that a perfect fourth, or do we need to alter the note somehow? So is that 2.5 steps? So we're going to start with the bottom. G up to the next natural note is A, and that is a whole step. A up to B is a whole step, so that gives us 2 whole steps, and then B up to C is just a half step. Remember, there's only a half step between B and C, and also between E and F. And if you look at the keyboard, piano keyboard, organ keyboard, electronic keyboard, any kind of keyboard that you can that uses the Western system, there's no black key in between B and C and E and F. So G to A, a whole step, A to B, a whole step, B to C, a half step. That's 2.5 steps. That means it is a perfect fourth. Yay! Ding, 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 ding. That wins. Okay. Now we're going to write an augmented fourth above F sharp. What's the first thing we do? We write the generic interval. So it's going to be F, G, A, B, some kind of a B. Now we're going to remember that the F sharp is our given note, and we're going to see now is that 3 steps. How many steps do we have? We want it to be 3 steps. So F sharp to G is a half step. G to A is a whole step. So that's 1.5. A to B is a whole step. That's 2.5. We want it to be 3.5 steps. Or I'm sorry, not 3.5, but 3 steps. We've got 2.5 right now from F sharp up to B. So we need to make this bigger. We need to augment it. So we're going to raise the B from B to B sharp. And that gives us our augmented second. Okay, finally, we have a D given, and we need to write a diminished fourth below it. First thing we do is figure out the generic interval so we don't accidentally misspell it, okay? So it's going to be D, C, B, A, and A will be the bottom note. And now we're going to look at what kind of fifth do we have already. I mean, not what kind of fifth, but what kind of fourth do we have already. And we go from D down to C, that's a whole step. C to B is a half step, because remember, C to B is only a half step. There's no black key between C's and B's. All right, so that's 1.5 steps. And then from B to A is another whole step, so that's 2.5 steps. So if it's D down to A is 2.5 steps, what kind of fourth do we have right now? A perfect fourth. We want this to be smaller. The note that we were given was the D, so the note we can change is the A. So we have to make that A closer to the D, make the distance between the A and the D smaller, diminish it, and we do that by raising the A by adding a sharp. So there you have it. Now let's say that we're just identifying some intervals. We'll switch to the bass clef, and let's do an E. And do you want to go down or up? down. Okay, let's do E down to B, and let's see what kind of fourth do we have, because that is a fourth and we're doing fourths. So E flat down to D is a half step. D to C is a whole step, so we have 1.5. Then C to B is a half step. That gives us 2 steps altogether. That would be 4 half steps, and if we were counting it by half steps, if you prefer to do that, E flat to D is a half step. D to C sharp is a half step. C sharp to C is a half step, and C to B is a half step. So it comes up 4 half steps, which is 2 steps. Whatever way that you look at it, that is a diminished fourth. And we've figured out that quality to begin with. Let's take and do that with a fifth. Let's do F down to B. We've got, that's a fifth, because of F, E, D, C, B. That makes 5. So that's a fifth. So we know the generic interval is a fifth. And now we want to see, is that 3.5 steps, which make a perfect fifth, or is that 3 steps, a tritone, an harmonic equivalent of a augmented fourth? Is this a diminished fifth? Maybe it's an augmented fifth. What do we know? Let's see what the distance is. F down to E is a half step, so 0.5. E down to D is a whole step, 1.5. D down to C, another whole step, 2.5. C to B, another half step. Add 0.5 to 2.5, what do we get? That's right, 3. That's 3 steps. 3 steps is a tritone. 3.5 steps would be a perfect fifth. So that is a diminished fifth. Okay, I hope that helps. Have fun writing intervals. If you're confused, I'm here to help you.